Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being with us. I should say hello. Thank you for being with us since this is being recorded for on-demand access. Today, our webinar is Understanding Dietary Preferences and Restrictions of International Travelers. And we're very pleased to have Chef Edward Adele with us. Chef is a culinary instructor at Johnson County Community College. This is his second webinar that he's doing for us on topics related to cuisines for international travelers. And we're very happy to have him with us here again. Before we dive into the webinar, I'm Lori Piper, Assistant Director for Global Resources with the International Division at the Kansas Department of Commerce. We help build the economy of the state of Kansas through international business. And we do this through strategically building our international business ecosystem. So we do diplomacy, investment attraction, export promotion, and resource development to help businesses in the state be successful internationally. We have a number of areas of activities. One of them is industry engagement. And today what we're doing is working with the hospitality industry cluster to help develop our export potential through the hospitality industry. So we have a number of webinars that are part of this series. We're recording them all so that they're available for people to watch them. And we have several more coming up after today. Later in January, we have how to market to international travelers, and then also understanding international customer needs. So this is my contact information. If I can do anything for you or you need assistance in finding our webinars, please let me know. And with that, I want to turn things over to Chef Adele. And I know I'm really excited to learn from you today and to be able to share your experience and recommendations with our viewers. So, Chef, it's your show now.
All right. Hello, my name is Edward Adele. I'm from Johnson County Community College. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. Um, Today, we're going to talk about some dietary needs in different ways. So, as I break down today's topics of conversation, we're going to look at several different things. The main topics will be food related religious concerns, healthy habits and clean food, health and lifestyle, and personalized nutrition. Healthy habits utilizing a high ratio of plant-based proteins, consumption of gluten and fiber, along with protein-packed foods. And lastly, a focus on banned chemicals and preservatives and the FPAS, the polyfluoroalkyl. So, and what that is and how the rest of the world is starting to ban that. So we'll get into those topics one by one. If anyone has a question, and as we go through this, Molly is there and she can maybe flag those and bring those up as we go. So anyway, the first topic, which is, definitely smaller, but something that I think that we should, definitely bring into the conversation. And that is, some of the religious aspects of food consumption and the different types of religions. And if we look at what are, the three largest religions, um, Christianity, Hindu, and Muslim. If we look at those and just kind of things about them and food, they may or may not come into play. We don't know who the teams are. We don't know who our international guests are going to be, but this is definitely a potential. The more diversity of people that come in here, the opportunity to have religious diversity is definitely a factor that we should keep in mind. Not the only one, but definitely one that I think we should just realize, recognize, and talk about. Um, Not that it's the only one out there. But for example, Christianity, I worked in hotels when I was younger, and we always had a fish special on Fridays. Fish usually is more during Lent, but we did find that this was kind of a thing that we did, a standard that we had for whatever reason, where we had fish specials on Fridays, and we always had clam chowder on Friday too. So I think that that is just something to keep in mind. I'm not exactly sure who's going to be coming here, but that's always kind of a good standby philosophy there. Um, Other religions are have other things. Hindu, for example, they don't eat beef. So I'm not sure if this would come about, but many are vegetarian and often avoid foods of stimulus, and they consider some of these foods of stimulus to be garlic, ginger, spicy things. They eat in a way that is softer, more gentle. They believe that um, uh, extra spiciness is maybe a little bit too aggressive. Um, and then also the consideration if somebody does approach and says that they are a vegetarian to realize that perhaps eggs is an issue. Sometimes they're lacto-ovo and they would eat eggs and cheese, but many times they may say they're vegetarian and they don't, so we would have to kind of uh, field our way through that. But for sure, Hindu would be a religion that is slightly vegetarian. They eat mainly fish, vegetables, that type of stuff. Um, Also, they eat, or we find international people that are eating in this type of sect with the avoidance of pork, but also the avoidance of alcohol, and they try to eat things that they would consider peaceful, clean, and we'll get into clean eating too later on, as I stated earlier. But the abundance of fresh fruits and vegetables and whole grains, I think, and we'll find this to be kind of a repeating theme as we go through what is international, what do people look for internationally, right? So, and then,
So,
uh,
Chef,
yes,
you said that you would love to have questions during your presentation.
sure.
And so I was wondering if you might elaborate a little bit on some of the preferences for vegetarians. I know you said that some eat eggs and cheese, others don't. Something that I've seen sometimes is that um, um, restaurants sometimes think that like if they just have salad on the menu, then vegetarians are covered. Are you going to go a little bit further into like what some things might be for vegetarians, or should we save that for later?
I mean, I can talk about that now. I mean, I did have it down later, but we can skip to that as it's a good question. Um, when you develop something that's vegetarian, um, you want to try and uh, remember that you're looking for, a trend that you'll find internationally is we're trying to find high fiber, clean, protein packed types of foods. And so, um, if you're vegan and you're not, and they don't eat eggs and dairy, we need to put together two different things. So usually you have beans and beans mixed with either a potato or rice, right? These two things or corn will make a protein. So bean has the ability to be a protein, but it lacks a molecular connector. And so that molecular connector you can get or pick up through eating beans with potatoes together or rice together or corn together. You'll find that there are, communities around the world that have figured this out. So when you go to places, you go to, Germany, India, you go to places and you'll find that they have like very classic German lentil soup with potatoes in it, right? Or you'll find that there is beans with potatoes, in an Indian dish. And this is because inside the United States, we, are very protein heavy. We have a lot of meat, we grow a lot of meat, we have lots of animals around, but that is not everywhere in the world. And so a lot of people have to make up their diet with very little meat. And the protein for a healthy lifestyle has to come through this combination of vegetable mixes. And they, almost always are going to include one of those, three types of combinations. And you find that from the Aztec, Inca, Native Americans, with the corn and beans and what is succotash, or what is the three sisters, where they put these things together and you have corn and bean synergy. And so we find this. So anyway, that is definitely part of the conversation of what is vegetarian. So how do you take those comments that I just said and turn it into a menu dish? Or how does that become something besides a pile of beans and potatoes and rice in your plate? And that's kind of the challenge, is how do we make something? And we have some things that are out there now. When you talk about clean food and processed foods, you'd have to look at that if you're buying a product. But for sure, we make things like black bean burgers, or we make things that are, a pasta with something in it that gives you that same ability to have protein. So it becomes an entree. You could stuff, something, a squash, and make it so that it's a nice thing that you're cutting with a knife and a fork, and you're eating it like it is, a center of the plate piece, like you would think of a piece of beef or chicken or something. And so trying to create that, creatively is definitely the way to go. Now, you'll find that there's a big trend now. Now, this is not vegan, but on the vegetarian side, especially with this new diet, stuff that's going around, where people are, taking different types of dietary medicines, and they're losing weight. The one thing, it decreases their appetite, and so the one thing that becomes a problem is intake of protein. And so how do you get protein into your diet? Now, if you're vegetarian, you're doing this, protein is already hard enough as it is. So you find that there's people that are creating recipes that are out there that are taking things like cottage cheese and ricotta and eggs, and they're, mixing them in different combinations, blending them together, and they're making things that are substitutes for like bread, or for like some sort of a cake, that you can make and eat, and have it be way more healthy and be protein packed without having to, have actual protein in there. So that's kind of a unique way to do that. I've seen where people take this type of mixture, where you would take cottage cheese or ricotta cheese, the one that's really protein packed, and add some eggs to it and blend it up, put some cheese in there, and then spread it out over things like zucchini or yellow squash or something like this, and bake that till it's hard, with some Parmesan cheese on there. And they turn that into like the outside of a wrap, where you could wrap a salad, or you could wrap something in it, that's vegetarian, and make it like a sandwich, but there's no, gluten, and that's another part of what's going on, is to try and stay away from gluten a little bit. But anyway, does that,
Well, thank you.
all right. Okay. So I'll jump back into this, because really the religious part is a very small part of the presentation. It's just the beginning part, so I can, just make sure we discuss it. It's just because I don't want anyone to think that we ignored it. I don't know if it's going to be that big of a thing, but I think if we have on the top of our mind that these things are an issue, or could be an issue, and we know what they are, then it makes it a non-issue. So that's the only reason I bring it up. And so then as we move, um, again, the third kind of large one is Muslim, and of course, no pork, there, no alcohol. I think the bigger thing for this type of a cuisine, I mean, halal meat, but then also they have some residual things that become an issue in processing. So to have less process, again, I told you this is going to be the thing, less processed, more clean foods is going to be, and all the things that we talk about, it's going to be really going to be that kind of heavy trend on what is international, internationally, everyone in the United States too, they're all looking for this. Um, so because in the processing, you can have things like gelatin, which comes from pork. You can have lard that comes from pork. You can have things like vanilla extract, which is made from as an alcohol base. And so religions that don't allow you to drink alcohol, they can't have that in their foods either. So this is, one of those things that becomes, something that we need to think about, right? When we're making these things, if we were to have, if we were to end up where we had some of these groups that are coming, or people that are associated with this that are coming, because we're in their pathway to and from the stadiums as they go and watch the games, perhaps we would notice this and we could make adjustments to our recipes or something to try and fill that need, that niche there to make sure that uh, they have something to eat and can come and enjoy. And we want to welcome everybody, want to make things welcoming, want to try and help them come in. So having some of this knowledge might help us or help you as a industry person, be able to capture some extra revenue there because of just a small conversation and a little bit of knowledge and an effort to try and accommodate, these foreign people that have come here to befriend us. So uh, anyway, as we move on from the religious part, I mean, we have Judaism too. So, and that would be again, no pork and no shellfish. And there's other stuff. They have other restricted stuff. So, but to move on from that and to talk about as we started earlier uh, with Lori's comment, the healthy food habits and clean food. I think this is a big trend that we see around the globe, of international travelers. People are looking for foods that are less processed, grown more locally with less chemicals that are treated more humanely, less of everything, just more fresh, more natural, right? Uh, and so we would say clean food refers to a dietary approach focusing on eating whole, minimally processed foods in their most natural state. This involves prioritizing fruits, vegetables, whole grains, lean proteins, and healthy fats while minimizing or avoiding highly processed foods, added sugar, refined grains, and artificial ingredients. Artificial ingredients is a big one right there. Um, Clean eating is more of a lifestyle than a restrictive diet. Now, some people have allergies or they have allergic reactions to different foods. So that is definitely in here, but a lot of people are making this choice because they want to perhaps there's a philosophy after that if I eat too much of it, I become allergic to it. So they try to not eat the stuff so they can stay, more healthy, right? So what clean eating avoids highly probably I agree with that. We will also want to stay away from white bread, white pasta, other products that are refined, unhealthy fats, right? So here are a few food and ingredient trends, right? A plant-based diet. I think the consumer is starting to move more towards a plant-based diet. We do have you know, uh, these plant-based proteins that are out there, which, in my family, I have people that prefer that, they eat that. That is fine. I think it's fine to use and incorporate, not necessary. But if you're out there and that's what you think is something you can do for your establishment, I think that is a great thing to implement into what you're doing to have. But I think in general people are looking for internationally, people that are, going to be traveling, looking for a plant-based diet, not to be only plant-based, but to say, let's eat less of a protein and more of, a whole simplified vegetable. So if you in your restaurant have the ability to, procure around you from farms and local farmers and purveyors and distributors, what is fresh, what is in season, and cook it simply. I think that we'll find that that an international travel might find. And then a little bit clearly we have here in the Midwest, if they're coming to Kansas City, we're close to the farm, we have beef, we have locally raised chicken, we have all these things. And so those things, less processing, less um um chemicals and you know what do I want to say? Uh uh Steroids, right? Less steroids in there. So, and antibiotic, those are the two things, steroids and antibiotics, that we would try and keep out of the animal. So if you have that, a smaller portion, heavier on vegetables, I think is where that, when we say plant-based or we talk about plant-based, that not everybody is only plant-based, but to have a heavier plant-based type of a philosophy, theory in your restaurant, right? Uh, the other thing is look for nutrient dense types of foods, right? So when we look at nutrient dense, this is something that you could promote, you could say that we buy these types of things. We could say, yes, we try to find nutrient dense products. And so what we're saying is that we're trying to find the proper soil that our vegetables are grown in, that is has less chemicals, more nutrients naturally in there. How are they processing the soil? This is something that, you could go to a farmer, and there's farmers that do this. A lot of organic people are doing this. They're making their farm, their soils is what they manage, and with all that nutrients, that's what gives the impact, the more nutrient dense into their vegetables, right? Is if we can watch the soil. So you'll find that, and this would be another thing that you could do is if you were connected with a farmer and you talk to them about, their soil and what they do and how they treat it and that they're organic and one of the things they do. This would be a way to gather some sort of information to give to your guest. And if that was one of their concerns, that's what they wanted to do, right? So, functional foods, products marketed for specific health benefits, such as um, items that promote gut health. I think another trend there is that people look for really to improve their gut health. If they have a good system going and they're eating and they have clean food, if they have a good gut health, people are trying to find ways to get probiotics naturally, right? Some of the things that they would look for, you can find that have these in there naturally that are gut friendly and with fiber in them, apples, berries, broccoli, leafy greens, oats, brown rice, beans, nuts, seeds are all some examples of things that have healthy fats, that have fiber, and promote a good gut health, which I think we find as uh, as we start to look into, how do the cultures of many, other countries outside the United States, how they might live. We kind of live where, I can put a potato on a train in Idaho and it comes to Kansas City, and we have potatoes. And, in other, countries, cultures, they may have the guy that's, 5 miles away that grows his potatoes and they bring it in. So it's more locally centralized. And so, but we might see people that think about that or bring that in as a concern, right?
So Chef, as
Yeah.
you're talking about this, like, very clean, healthy foods, what are your thoughts on sugar with respect to the international travelers?
Well, I know, we do competitions, outside the United States, and this is a big trend outside the United States to not use um, processed sugars. So as we get in, we talked about the processing and processed food. Sugar is definitely one of those that's an issue. So to use things that are more natural, right? Honey, for example, sorghum, right? There's a thing called monk sugar, which is a nice alternative to regular processed sugar. Sugar in the raw is a good choice there. But yeah, I think that, processed sugar is, clearly the United States, we have, an obesity problem, diabetes, and a lot of it's led to, based on the fact that we eat too much sugar. We find that we have refined sugar in so many different products. And, we know as chefs, as we grow up cooking, learning how to cook, you know, everything that is savory needs a little sugar, and everything that's sweet needs a little salt. But we need to maybe not use so much processed sugar in the savory stuff that needs to be a little sweet, and try and bring back some more natural choices there. And then, our sweets we can limit, or, try and, use a little bit more natural type sugars there. So for sure, I think, sugar is one of the things in this when they talk about processing clean food is not a good one, right? So having some desserts or having some things, you know, you can make things very simple. You know, I find that when I want something sweet and I don't really feel like having a cake or eating these sugar things, I can take something like a kefir cheese or a labna, or it's kind of like a overly thick Greek yogurt, right? And I can take that with some fresh berries and honey and chai seed and some chopped toasted nuts, and I can make myself a really, sweet dessert that fixes my craving for sweet, but I don't necessarily have to take in any of that um, processed sugar, and have so much to try and fix that. Go, eat a candy bar or something. I can, have that. So I enjoy that a little bit. So I mean, things like that you can do, and again, we talk about um, desserts as we brought up. Um, how to impact protein, in the same way we talked about cake. So I've worked on some recipes and made some stuff for my family where we would take to try and implement more protein into their diet without having to give them meat. And we might take cottage cheese or ricotta, one of these with some eggs, right, and some fruit, and make like a little bit more protein packed cheesecake, right? And maybe we don't, try to stay away from what is a flour crusted dough, to try and stay away from gluten because we haven't got to the gluten one yet. But gluten is also something I think we find people trying to stay away from, trying to find alternative ways to stay away from gluten. But, and then that with some honey and fruit on it, right? And it has, if cream cheese is good, but it doesn't necessarily have that same, cultured dairy tart flavor that I think really pops, makes the desserts type of pop with a little bit of different berries or fruits and honey. So I've worked on some recipes like that. So I think that is another angle for a dessert and to stay away from those processed sugars. So
Thank you.
okay. Um, Another thing that I think that people are working on, a trend that's out there, a kind of a buzzword, was a healthy lifestyle trends, personalized nutrition, right? So people are trying to personalize their nutrition to their body. So this is definitely a trend that's out there. So people may be very specific about what they ask for because they may feel like they've gone to some specialist, and if they eat more of whatever type of vegetables, fruits, grains, it's better for their individual body. So I think you'll find people that are, studying themselves personally and figuring that out. So to be open with people who are asking for specific things is, you can't have every single thing on your menu, to please everybody. But there might be an opportunity there with things that you already have, knowing what a person's personalized diet might be that you might be able to assist them with. So that's always to try and make a connection with the people internationally and trying to make connection with the international traveler to befriend them, to bring it in. I mean, those are experiences and stuff. This would be maybe a way to try and engage with somebody that way and, try and build a loyalty for the time that they are here. So, and we've talked about this, but it's on my notes here. So I just wanted to make sure I read it in the way that I wrote it. So, but healthy habits which utilize a high ratio of plant-based foods to protein. I talked about it earlier, but high ratio of plant-based foods compared to protein, right? So if we think about this from an entrepreneurial standpoint, I mean, not that vegetables are cheap, and if you buy special ones, they're not going to be cheap, but they're cheaper than the proteins that we are probably going to use. So we can offset our cost by having really nice specialty proteins with a smaller portion because people are trending to eat less portion of protein and more of vegetables, especially here in Kansas City in the United States. I brought people in and they go to restaurants. They're like, oh my God, there's so much food. Our plates are so big. So I do think that people will be into, will see a little bit of a shock value because of the size of portions that expect as Americans, as Kansas Cityans here. But anyway, but so we should think about that, right? As we, meet and greet and try to prepare for these international travelers that they may not be so protein based, and how can we do vegetables, and from a profitability standpoint, how does that affect, or how can that affect your profitability and keep you kind of in the game there, right? So, and then here, internationally, there's an increase in awareness of consumption of gluten, right? To reduce gluten, increase fiber, right? And protein packed foods, right? And then we talked about this. I've already gone over this stuff, but with the cottage cheese and how to apply that, and the different types of recipes and stuff that people are there, less refined foods, right? Uh, so the trend is internationally to avoid gluten, right? And try to go back to a little bit more fibrous type of a diet, right? So alternatives, right, to gluten, or alternatives to different flours. We have we can use quinoa, chickpea, right? Um, Rice, and we can take those, and I mean, clearly they don't have gluten, so they're not going to stretch and give us the texture, the ability to make breads with the same structure as gluten does. But it doesn't mean that we can't use them to make things in place of flour. For example, we can use them to make batters and doughs. So we can make uh, fritters, and we can make, little um, cake batters and things like this, um, that, take away the gluten, and, again, with a little bit of, the removal of refined sugars, and bring in some unprocessed items there. You can substitute out and make different things from different types of kofta and beignets and fritters and all these types of things, whether it's sweet or savory, by switching out to choosing a gluten-free or a less glutinous type of a flour in its place, if this was something that you was necessary for your, right. All right. So I think that uh, the next thing is the focus on the reducing of banned chemicals. So in the United States, we don't have them. We're going through a process right now where we're looking at these chemicals, dyes and such, that are not healthy. In other countries around the world, they have banned those. They've taken them out. They've made sure that they don't use them in their foods anymore. And so you might find international travelers that come here that are going to be looking for that same thing. They're going to be not wanting to consume these banned chemicals from their countries, and a lot of them um, are um, coloring, their dyes, colors, and preservatives. Okay, so we want to try and make sure that you're looking away from that. Again, it's the same, theory, clean foods, and this is what they're talking about. Clean foods is another thing, is to not have these types of chemicals, right, in their food. Now, the other thing too, chemical wise, we talked about it, chemicals in the soil. So we know we have chemical dyes, we have chemicals that go into the food and into the preservative processing part, but also in the growing part. So to have GMOs or non-GMO foods would probably be a good selling point, to have non-GMO type products, right? GMOs, generally genetically modified organism, right? So that it doesn't react to the chemical they put on there, and so it absorbs the chemical. So GMOs, right, have a, they feel like there's a chemical intake there that leads to diseases. So to have non-GMOs would be good. So, some of the things would be like, we talk about chemicals, red dye number 3, right? This is a problem. Proactively reformulating products, uh, right? So uh, this is a buzzword, right? Proactively reformulating products, right? This is what they're trying to do, right? To try and take products and use natural ingredients to get the same result and clean their food up, right? So, so uh, they they precautionary principle. The EU's approach is often based on the precautionary principle, meaning a ban is enacted if there is a potential for harm. So they are uh, precautionarily, so in advance of totally finding out if the products or these processing things are, having 100% proof that they are bad for you, they're starting to fall away and try and not use them and put regulations in because they don't want to wait till we've already figured out that, it makes people sick. And so they are doing that. So you might find that there's food products that they may ask you, are they in your food? And so having or knowing that might be of interest to you so you can answer some of those questions. So things like for processing, I think the big word is titanium dioxide, right? Um, this is one of the potentially uh, genotoxic toxicity and a possibility of a link to cancer. So this might be something that you might find that somebody would ask you about, right? Um, BPA, bisphenol A, right? Well, not a global ban, there is a strong international trend of companies moving to BPA-free packaging. So this is chemicals in the packaging process. So when they say natural, when they say uh, unrefined, they're also looking into packaging and how are chemicals from the packaging process and the types of packages and how they're made with plastics and sealants and adhesives and gases. How does that affect the food when they put them into the processing? So this may be also something that you find as a comment or something that somebody might bring forth to you or ask a question about, right? Potassium bromate, right? A flour improver that's banned in the EU and other regions due to its suspected cancer involvement, right? Uh, Brominate, vegetable oil, BBO is banned. Also, it's U.S. has banned it more recently after nearly 2 decades. So it's something that is being been banned. So that's another one that you might look for, BBOs, right? And I think the big one at the end here is this, and I'm going to screw up how to pronounce this name, but it's a PFAS, which stands for pre and polyfluoroalkyl. I think it's fluoroalkyl substance, and are a group of human-made chemicals used to make products resistant to water, grease, heat, and stains, right? So this again, it's known as a forever chemical, right? And it's found in many common items, including non-stick cookware, carpets, cleaning products, firefighting foam. So you might find that somebody might, wonder about the pan that I'm cooking to use non-stick pans. This would be something that would find, right? So just a few facts here. Nearly two-thirds of the paper takeout containers from the U.S. large grocery stores contain 11% of bakery and deli paper containing elevated levels of fluorine. The PFAs didn't become a global issue until multiple studies drew attention to potential health risks associated with the PFAS chemicals in food packaging, right? And the urge used to conduct a comprehensive analysis to identify other potentially harmful chemicals used in packaging that might face restrictions similar to PFAS. The examination focused on critical factors such as biodegradability, right, leaching tendencies, right, and current regulation of environmental studies. So so I think that, all that stuff at the end there is about packaging and the type of packaging that we might get stuff in. So when you look at to-go boxes, when you look at stuff that you're going to send out, so we might get to-go box, you might try and find something that is, you know, uh, as clean as possible and look on the packaging and for the chemical list and try to make sure it doesn't have any of those chemicals listed. That would probably help with some of the guests. So, all right. Well, is there any more questions?
I do have a
Chef?
question. Let me go ahead and
Oh, go ahead, Molly.
Sure. Question I had, and I think you touched a little bit on this earlier, when you mentioned, that perhaps portion size would be something, different that one might find in the United States from some international for some international audiences. And I wondered, your thoughts on how much some of the cultural influence on, not just necessarily portions, but like the serving style, or the ordering of like food courses or even cutlery. Noting that some individuals might prefer chopsticks or are used to eating with like naan or injera as like the main vehicle to consume food. So just kind of curious your thoughts on how much restaurants should be thinking about those kinds of things, or how much individuals visiting would be able to adjust to the U.S. style of eating, in terms of serving in particular, serving styles in particular.
Well, I'm sure that those are, something that I would think about. Um, but I also think that, like if I'm traveling here and I'm going to go to another country, I want to go and experience that country's food, trends, styles, all that stuff. And so I may not come in and influence right there what they're going to do with mine. So I would assume that people would do that. They may or may not appreciate it when they're done, but they might go, let's try this first. Because you might go to another country, you might go, okay, I'm going to try this, and be like, I don't really appreciate that as much as because I like. But I think that that people are going to come here, and clearly, if you had some Asian people and you thought they might want some chopsticks, I might go buy some and make sure they had it if that was for them. But and I don't know the style of food, so like to eat with naan or something like this may not work in your restaurant because that may not your food may not be able to be eaten that way. Um, so, um, but and then to have multiple courses, um, for sure, I think that some people might from certain European countries might eat in that fashion where they might have a salad and then an entree and then dessert. You know, but I think many restaurants now they kind of have they're kind of formulated in that way too. So, but I guess my recommendation there is I would open myself up to the guest and accept them and try and befriend them and bring them in and try and please them with whatever it is. And if one of those things was on the table, I would do it. But I think in general, as I travel around the world and do stuff, I want to go there and experience what they have there and do that and say, I've done that. I've gone to China and had hot pot. You know what I mean? And ate it the way that they would serve it to you. You know what I mean? So, you know, we might say we don't like the communal bowl that you dip all your stuff in, but you know, so
Thank
but
you.
anyway,
So,
that answer.
Molly, great
Yeah.
question, Molly. And Chef, your answer made me think about the themes in the last webinar that you did, and I kind of like to try to connect them. So, in our last webinar, you were did a great job of giving advice on how when international travelers come here, they're going to want to experience our local cuisine. They're going to want to experience foods from the Americas. And so you talked about like featuring Kansas ingredients and featuring Kansas beef and so forth. And so when we're now looking at some of the dietary preferences and in some instances, maybe restrictions for the international travelers, what might be some advice that you have for our restaurants and hospitality businesses on how they balance featuring our local dishes and our authentic cuisine with making some adaptations and alternatives for these dietary preferences and restrictions?
Yeah. So I mean in a lot of ways, that's a case by case basis. I might say, I'm one of my big, huge, barbecue restaurants, and I might say we're going to try and handle this the best that we can when they get here, but we're going to do the best of what we can do. But I might be a mom and pop place, and I might say I might be better off if I can try and bring in, you know, um, foods that are a little bit more healthy, that are a little bit more clean, that are a little bit more, and try and, get some of the, you know, ancillary people that are out there. If it truly works out the way that, people describe, and there's so many people here, every restaurant is going to be busy. Everybody's going to have that opportunity to take advantage of being there. And you just have to look at what is your opportunity, what is your business offering, where can it fit in? Because even though there's 60 profitable, vibrant barbecue restaurants in Kansas City, not everybody's going to be able to get into all of those at once. There's going to be too many people. They're going to be somewhere else. And they're going to want to experience other things too. They're not going to want to eat barbecue every day. They're going to want to go there once and go somewhere else, or maybe twice, or maybe go to two different ones, or I don't know. But so I would look at that and say, hey, how can I in my establishment, whatever that is, try and connect with, and I would try to be as, fluid as possible, because you don't know who's going to be walking in your pathway, who's going to be that person, because we may end up with people that are just in alleyways going from one place to the other, and whatever's along that pathway may be the only way that they get a chance to eat because of bus travel, transportation, parking, all these different things. And so you can take advantage of whoever ends up there by accommodating them, showing the hospitality, being hospitality industry, doing that exact thing to the best of your ability. And I think that will probably gain you more. I don't know if in advance, you usually you make all these plans to do everything, and that shows up and it's like, hey, throw that out the window, we'll start over again because we tried, but we have to change because something else happened. And so, not to say do nothing, but I would say make a plan that's very fluid, that you can adjust and move, and so that whatever you find out there, whatever comes across your path, you can take advantage of. I mean, clearly people are going to come here. They're going to come here with money in their pockets. They want to spend money, and that could be yours in your restaurant if you can accommodate them when they come by. So,
Yeah, great. So it sounds like the specialty restaurant should continue to feature their specialties and the dishes that they're known for, and promote their local cuisines, but then also maybe have some alternatives, and maybe some of the other restaurants that aren't, so much like specialty restaurants might have more room for adapting their menus to some of these trends that we've been talking about.
yeah, I can see that
Um,
being there.
but this was really great information, and it's really interesting to think about these trends, from a global perspective, and how even just making sure that staff are able to answer some of these questions that travelers might have. That's going to be really important also, and businesses being able to promote what they're offering. Yeah, this was really helpful information, the way you broke things down into different categories and offered suggestions. And I'm sure that our restaurants are really going to appreciate this. So, Chef, thank you again for offering a webinar for us. We look forward to sharing this, and staying connected with you, and helping businesses in the hospitality industry in our area as they engage with international guests and develop their international brands and reputation. So thank you so much.
All right, well, thank you so much for having me, and I'm glad to meet everybody. Molly, Lori, nice to meet you.
Thank you. Have a good day.
All right, bye.